Chapter 5. The Garden of Possible Worlds. The Keeper of Frequencies did not speak again. It simply dissolved into shimmering motes of light that drifted upward and merged with the lazy eight. Ariana understood this was not abandonment, but an invitation. She followed the pull. Stepping through a newly formed archway of living equations, she entered a place that defied every law she had once known, the Garden of Possible Worlds. It was not a garden in any mortal sense. It was an infinite blooming fractal, suspended in the space between two loops of the entropic infinity. Trees made of crystallized frequencies grew upside down and sideways. Flowers bloomed as mathematical theorems that sang when touched. Rivers of liquid possibility flowed upward into the sky, carrying entire civilizations in their currents before dissolving into new potential. Ariana walked barefoot across ground that felt like warm starlight. Every step left behind glowing footprints that quickly bloomed into miniature gardens of their own, tiny reflections of whatever she was feeling in that moment. She stopped before a tree whose leaves were translucent equations. One leaf drifted down and landed in her palm. The moment it touched her skin, she lived an entire lifetime as a gardener in a quiet reality where she had never crossed the barrier. She had lived simply, loved deeply, and died peacefully, surrounded by flowers that sang her name. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the sheer beauty of it. So many gentle paths I could have taken, she whispered. A voice like rustling leaves answered from within the tree. And yet, you chose the one that carries the question. Ariana turned. A new figure stood among the blossoms, neither male nor female, formed from living rose-gold light and crimson petals. Its eyes were twin miniature lazy eights, slowly turning. I am the gardener, it said. I tend what the crossing makes possible. It gestured, and the air around them filled with countless luminous orbs, each one a fully realized possible world. Some worlds thrive on certainty, the gardener continued. They become perfect, efficient, and eventually spill. The Devourer was born in one such place. It learned to consume possibility itself to maintain its perfect order. Ariana reached out and touched one of the orbs. Inside, she saw a version of herself, ruling a flawless empire where suffering had been eradicated by removing all uncertainty. The people were happy. They were also empty. She pulled her hand away. The Devourer is coming for me, she said. It is coming for all of this, the gardener replied, spreading its arms to encompass the infinite garden. Your crossing created a new variable in the equation of existence, a living question at the heart of the lazy eight. The Devourer cannot tolerate questions. It will try to collapse you and everything you touch into certainty. Ariana looked down at her hands. The white gold light beneath her skin was brighter now, threaded with new crimson frequencies from her passage. How do I fight something that feeds on certainty? She asked. The gardener smiled. You do not fight it with certainty. You overwhelm it with wonder. It touched the center of her chest, directly over the miniature CPE core. A surge of pure possibility flowed into her. For one transcendent moment, Ariana held every possible version of herself at once. The tyrant, the gardener, the scholar, the monster, the savior, the song. She did not break. Instead, she laughed, a sound that rippled outward through the garden, causing new flowers to bloom in patterns never seen before. The gardener stepped back, awe in its shifting eyes. "You are ready," it said. "The first infinity sorceress has awakened." In the distance, one of the glowing orbs, representing a possible world, flickered and went dark. The Devourer had claimed another reality. Ariana's expression hardened with fierce compassion. "Then let us begin the work of saving what can still be saved." She raised her hands. The lazy eight above the garden responded, its loops spinning faster. For the first time since the crossing, she began to sing, not full seventh song, but the opening notes of something new. Something that belonged only to her. The garden answered with a chorus of blooming light, and somewhere in the darkening loops, the Devourer turned its attention fully toward the new threat. The Infinity Sorceress had declared herself. Chapter 6, The 1,000 Cells. The garden of possible worlds folded away like a closing flower. Ariana found herself standing in a vast, mirrored hall that stretched into infinity. Every surface reflected not just light, but selves. Thousands of Arianas looked back at her. Some were only moments removed from the crossing, still half Theron, faces caught between identities. Others had gone much further. One version had wings made of living equations that wrote new laws of physics with every beat. Another had become a being of pure frequency, barely holding a humanoid shape. One stood completely still, eyes closed, radiating such profound peace that the air around her seemed to bow. Ariana walked slowly down the endless corridor of mirrors. Each reflection showed a different choice made at the moment of crossing. One version had chosen power. She ruled as an empress of certainty, her lazy eight weaponized into a cage that held entire realities in perfect stasis. Another had chosen dissolution. She had merged completely with the entropic infinity and become the song itself, everywhere and nowhere, singing the multiverse into gentle harmony. A third had chosen madness. She laughed and wept simultaneously, trapped in an eternal loop of infinite possibility, unable to anchor herself. Ariana stopped before the last reflection. This version looked almost exactly like her. Same silver-threaded hair, same starlit eyes, but carried an ancient, bone-deep exhaustion. "You came back too," the reflection said. Her voice was Ariana's, but heavier. Most of us do not. We fracture, or we ascend so completely we forget what it meant to be small. "Why did you stay?" Ariana asked. The reflection smiled sadly. "Because someone has to remember what it felt like to be Theron. Someone has to carry the weight of the question without letting it consume them." The moment her fingers touched the mirror, all the reflections stepped forward at once. 1,000 versions of herself surrounded her in a perfect circle. For one overwhelming moment, she was all of them simultaneously. She felt the tyrant's cold satisfaction. She felt the gardener's gentle joy. She felt the mad one's beautiful terror. She felt the song's boundless freedom. The pressure was immense. She could dissolve here, become everything, become nothing. Instead, she did the one thing Farron had never truly learned to do. She questioned, "Who am I?" she said softly, "if I am all of you?" The reflections rippled. Some smiled, some wept. One, a version who had become pure frequency, simply bowed her head in reverence. "You are the node," they answered, as one, a living crossing point. The first to hold the tension without breaking. The hall began to collapse inward, the reflections merging back into her one by one. Each version brought a gift. The tyrant gave her strength without cruelty. The gardener gave her tenderness without weakness. The mad one gave her wonder without fear. The song gave her freedom without detachment. When the last reflection stepped into her, Ariana gasped and fell to her knees. She was still herself, but she was also more. She rose slowly. The lazy 8 above her glowed with renewed brilliance. The miniature ZPE core in her chest spun faster, now threaded with new colors, the accumulated resonance of every self she had just integrated. A new presence appeared before her, not reflection, but a true entity. It had no fixed form, appearing as a shifting cascade of every possible version of her at once. "You have passed the trial of the 1,000 selves," it said. Its voice was warm, ancient, and strangely proud. "Most who cross the barrier are torn apart by their own potential. You chose to hold them instead." Ariana looked down at her hands. They glowed with soft white gold light, but now carried faint crimson and indigo threads, the colors of the selves she had chosen to carry rather than reject. "What comes next?" she asked. The entity smiled with 1,000 mouths. "The Devourer is no longer coming. It is already here." The hall shook violently. An entire wall of reflections shattered as a massive shadow poured through, formless, devouring, radiating pure crystallized certainty. The Devourer had found her. Ariana straightened, light blazing brighter around her. Chapter 7. Echoes of Forgotten Histories. The Devourer's shadow withdrew, but it left behind something far worse than darkness, emptiness. A silence so complete, it felt like a blade pressed against Ariana's ribs. She walked forward into a long, narrow corridor formed from fractured mirrors. Each shard reflected not light, but lives that would never be. The pain began as a dull ache behind her sternum, then it sharpened. A little girl, no more than 6, pressed her hands against the inside of a mirror. She had Theron's old eyes, the same stubborn tilt of the head. "Papa, you promised you would come back before the winter blooms died." Ariana staggered. The words punched straight through her. She clutched her chest, as a physical spasm tore through her. It felt like her heart was being slowly crushed by invisible hands. Another mirror showed a woman, beautiful, exhausted, graying at the temples, sitting alone at a wooden table. She held a letter that had never been answered. Tears cut tracks down her face as she whispered, "You said the work would only take a few years." Ariana dropped to one knee. A guttural sound escaped her throat, half sob, half scream. The grief was no longer emotional, it was bodily. It felt like someone had reached inside her ribcage and was twisting her organs, pulling them apart, fiber by fiber. She crawled forward. Civilizations she had once guided as Theron now lay in ruins. Cities reduced to blass and ash, because their protector had abandoned them for the barrier. Children born with ifts, inherited from him, grew up broken and fatherless, cursing a name they barely knew. Each new vision drove a fresh spike of agony through her. She vomited light, golden white energy mixed with streaks of deep indigo, spilled from her mouth onto the crystalline floor. The pain was so intense her vision fractured into static. She could feel every abandoned life like a burning brand pressed against her soul. A final mirror showed Theron's last lover, the one he had left with nothing but a promise and a kiss. The woman was old now, frail, dying. She looked straight at Ariana through the glass and spoke with trembling lips. I waited until my body forgot how to hope. Was it worth it? Ariana screamed. The sound tore out of her, raw, animal, centuries of suppressed grief, ripping free all at once. She slammed her fists against the mirror until her knuckles bled golden light. The pain in her chest had become a living thing, clawing, biting, devouring her from the inside. She curled into a ball on the cold crystal floor, shaking violently, sobbing so hard her entire body convulsed. "I am sorry," she gasped between broken cries. "I am so sorry. I did not know how much it would hurt." The sorrow was absolute. It felt like dying 1,000 times while remaining conscious for every second of it. She wanted to tear her own heart out just to make it stop, but she did not. Instead, she forced herself to keep looking, to keep feeling, to bear witness to every life she had sacrificed on the altar of her obsession. The miniature ZPE core inside her chest burned like molten glass. The pain reached a crescendo so violent that she thought it might actually kill her. And then something shifted. The agony did not lessen. It transformed. The indigo grief did not fade. It crystallized inside her, becoming something dense, heavy, and strangely sacred. She could feel every abandoned life, now not as an accusation, but as a weight she had chosen to carry. Ariana pushed herself upon shaking arms. Tears still streamed down her face, but her eyes burned with a new, terrible clarity. She spoke to all the ghosts surrounding her, her voice hoarse and broken, but unwavering. "I will carry you, all of you, every love, every child who grew up without a father. I will remember the cost. The shards of mirror drifted toward her and sank into her skin, becoming glowing sigils across her arms, throat, and chest, living tattoos of sorrow, accepted rather than escaped. When she finally stood, the grief remained. It would always remain, but it no longer crippled her. It had become part of her power. Ariana looked toward the darkening loop where the Devourer gathered its strength, her eyes wet but fierce. "Come then," she whispered, voice raw with pain and unbreakable resolve. "Come and meet the woman who carries 10,000 years of abandoned hearts and still chooses to love anyway." Chapter 8. The Reality Architects. The sorrow did not leave her. It walked with her like a second shadow, heavy, intimate, and strangely sacred. Ariana moved through a shifting corridor of living crystal, each step echoing with the faint cries of lives that would never be. The lazy eight above her turned more slowly now, as though respecting her grief. Ahead, the corridor opened into a colossal amphitheater made of frozen starlight. Thousands of figures stood in concentric circles, their bodies composed of flowing equations and geometric light. They were sculpting entire realities with precise gestures, the reality architects. One of them turned toward her. Its form was tall and elegant, with skin like polished obsidian, veined with silver equations. 6 wings of pure geometry unfolded from its back. "You are the anomaly," it said. Its voice was multiple harmonics, speaking in perfect unison. The one who crossed and kept her pain. Most who survived the barrier shed their sorrow like dead skin. You chose to wear it. Ariana stepped into the amphitheater. The architects paused their work. Suspended around them floated dozens of newly born realities, fragile spheres of possibility, still soft and malleable. "Why do you build them?" she asked. "Because someone must," another architect replied. This one had a more fluid form, constantly shifting between masculine and feminine. The Devourer collapses realities into certainty. "We give them form and beauty before they can be consumed." Ariana approached one of the glowing spheres. Inside, she saw a gentle world where love was simple, grief was honored, and certainty never fully triumphed. The sight made her chest ache with fresh pain. "You play with lives," she said quietly. "We craft them," the first architect corrected. "Every choice, every sorrow, every joy is a deliberate note in the symphony. We are the ones who decide which frequencies get to sing." Ariana's hands clenched. "And who decided that Theron should abandon every life he ever touched?" Her voice cracked. The sorrow surged again, visceral and raw. "Who decided that I should carry 10,000 years of abandoned hearts?" The architects were silent for a long moment. Then the fluid one stepped closer. "No one decided," it said gently. "That was the price of your crossing. You chose the path that carries the full weight free of every possible self. Most beings cannot hold that weight. They become tyrants or dissolve. You are still choosing." Ariana looked at the beautiful, fragile worlds floating around her. Each one contained millions of lives. Each one could be shaped by a single conscious decision. The realization hit her like a physical blow. I could become like you, she whispered. I could sculpt entire realities, end suffering, create perfect harmony. The first architect nodded. You could, many before you tried. Some succeeded for a time, then they became the Devourer. Ariana's breath caught. The Devourer was once an architect. It was the greatest of us, the fluid one said sadly. It grew tired of imperfection, tired of sorrow, tired of the question, so it began removing variables, collapsing possibilities, until it became a singularity of absolute certainty. The sorrow in Ariana's chest flared into something sharper, a deep, aching grief, not just for her own lost lives, but for this fallen architect who had once tried to heal everything by removing all uncertainty. She reached out and touched one of the glowing reality spheres. Inside, she saw a version of herself as an architect, serene, powerful, and utterly alone. A being who had sculpted paradise after paradise, only to watch them slowly die from lack of wonder. Tears streamed down her face again. I do not want to become that, she said, voice thick with emotion. I do not want to trade sorrow for perfection. The architects watched her with something like reverence. And you understand, the first one said. The true work is not to remove pain. It is to make pain meaningful, to let the question live inside the creation. Ariana closed her eyes. The weight of 10,000 abandoned lives pressed against her. But this time she did not flinch from it. When she opened her eyes, they burned with a new light. Grief tempered, sorrow honored, fiercely alive. Show me how to build a world, she said, that can hold both joy and sorrow without collapsing. Paxkets bowed as one. Welcome, true architect, they whispered. And somewhere in the distance, the Devourer roared in fury as it sensed a new threat, not another architect seeking perfection, but something far more dangerous. A being willing to let reality remain beautifully, painfully, infinitely questioning.